I just got an upgrade to my video editing software. It's made by Magix, and the upgrade is to version 18. Coincidentally, the same day I got it, I also got a request from the Old Time Piano Contest, which is held in Oxford, Mississippi every Memorial Day weekend, to record my wife playing piano in our living room so that they can use it in a Labor Day stream that they plan on broadcasting. So this is the first time I've gotten a chance to use this version of the software, which is a significant update from the previous version 17. It's also the first time I'm going to be using a new Zcam camera that I've gotten. It's the Model E2, and it's the first time I'm going to be using it in a project from beginning to end and editing it with Vegas. So for this project, I did a simple 20-minute shoot with a single camera set to 4K H.265 format, and also used a separate flash recorder to record the audio, which consists of a single vocal track plus a stereo piano track. But before I get into the editing, let me first cover the specifics of the media and my system. So this is the work directory that I'm going to be using. It's on my work drive, and I've called it this. And I've created two subdirectories here, one where I can put my Vegas edits and the other one which has the media in it. Opening the media subdirectory, I've created a few more subdirectories, one for audio. I'm going to eventually add reverb to this, and I'm going to put my Zcam clips in here. Looking at the audio directory, I've got 3 audio files. The piano left and right, each a mono file, and another mono file for the vocal. Let's take a look at this with media info. It's a 48K wave file, 24-bit sampling depth. It's basically the same for the left and the right, and the vocal is pretty much the same deal. Same thing. Now taking a look at the Zcam. What I've got here is I set up the Zcam to do 1-minute splits. So it's split recording every single minute. So each of these is a minute, and there's 20 of them. The total recording time was just a little bit over 19 minutes. So this file has probably got smaller than most of the rest of them. Take a quick look at the media info for this file. And as you can see, Zcam puts an awful lot of metadata in there about everything about how your camera was set. I'm recording Rec 709. I decided not to use the Zcam log format for this particular thing, just to keep it simple, because that way I can yank it up without a LUT or anything. And it's under controlled circumstances, so I don't think it's that critical because I've got good lighting, very rigorously controlled color temperature. So everything's going to come up pretty darn good. You can see this is a 4K format. I'm using the slowest bit rate that they give you for 4K H.265, and I'm shooting at 29.970 frames per second, which is pretty standard where I live. This is 10-bit color depth, and this is important, 420 chroma subsampling. We found that the video hardware, particularly made by NVIDIA and AMD, can only process 420 chroma subsampling. Intel is rumored to be coming out with something soon to allow its onboard processors to handle more than that, but it's not quite here yet, so we'll have to wait on that. Here's the audio track, which I'm not really going to be using except for alignment purposes, to align the other audio tracks which are recorded externally. The real thing that I'm going to be using is just pretty much the video track that you see here. Now, I've got another subdirectory here which I've called cat. I don't have anything in it, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to catenate all of these files into one big long file. And the reason I'm doing that is because Zcam has a fundamental problem when it comes to recording audio on its camera. The first track seems to be in good sync with the video, the audio and the video in good sync. But once you get off the first clip, the audio starts to drift. And by the time you get down here, it's way out of sync. What Zcam does for you, though, is they have a workaround, and the workaround is to give you a utility which concatenates these all into one big file, and at the same time gets all the audio into perfect alignment. So I'm going to end up doing that. In fact, maybe I'll just do it right now, and I'm going to put the concatenated clip into this subdirectory here. So I'm going to fire up the Zcam utility, if I can remember where I put it. Oh, I think I have it. Oh yeah, here we go. This is the Zcam concatenate utility, and I'm going to fire that up. And they want to know what the source subdirectory is going to be, so I'm going to point it to this directory over here. This is the folder, so I'm going to select this. It's found all the files. And now I have to tell it where to put it. And this has to be different than the folder that you started with, which is why I created that cat directory. Okay, now we got that selected. And I'm going to tell it to start. This runs pretty briskly. Not a very long project. So I think if I shot at a higher bit rate, it'd probably take longer, but it's done. And I exit out and I come and look in here, and there's the file. Notice it's changed my MP4 that I shot in to MOV wrapper. And when you look at this with media info, all their wonderful metadata got pretty much stripped out. But you can see that the basic bit rate and pixels, the format, color depth, chroma subsampling, all the same. And the beauty of this is that the audio is going to be in sync with the video from beginning to end. And now for my video workstation. I'm using a work drive right now that consists of an M.2 SSD. It's a 2 terabyte Samsung unit. I'm going to be recording the video that you're watching to this directory here. This is the AMD Relive facility. It's really intended so that gamers can see their brilliant gameplay moments and record them. I'm recording the entire screen to this while I'm running Vegas and showing you stuff. This is the actual file that's being recorded right now. And as you can see, it's an MPEG-4. It's a 4K monitor I'm using, so this is capturing a 4K video file. But I'm not trying to be too fancy. I'm capturing it at 2997 frames per second. A lot of people would use 60, but this is probably sufficient for this purpose and won't slow down the system too much. Just keep in mind that, as I'm showing you performance on this system, that it is being slowed down by what I'm doing here, recording this at the same time. I'm using the GPU to run a whole lot of stuff. As far as the internals of my system, I'll show you the CPU-Z screen. This is Cupid. And as you can see, it's an Intel i9 9900K. It's got speed boost running. It typically runs at, I think, 3.6, 3.7 gigahertz, but it boosts up to 5 when it's safe to do so under load. Memory is 32 gigs. It's pretty fast RAM. I think it's 3400 I went with. The motherboard is an Asus Maximum 11 Extreme. And the graphics doesn't really show you much except for what's on the motherboard. Oh, actually, it will show you both. But I'll show you the graphics on a better screen than this. I'll use GPU-Z for that. Very much like CPU-Z, but for graphics. And the graphics processor, which is my main board, is a PCI board, the AMD Radeon 7. I found this to be about the fastest thing in creation for this particular video software. I also have built into the motherboard, which was supplied by ASUS, a Intel UHD Graphics 630. And I'll be showing you how I use these together on this system to maximum advantage. And now on to the video editing itself. One of the first things that I wanted to know when I first got this version of Vegas was how fast it loads up. It was supposed to have improved that somewhat, so I'm going to test that right now using the Windows alarm clock. Let's see how fast it loads. I'm going to click open here and as fast as I can start the alarm clock. A little bit over 8 seconds, about 8.5 seconds. Let me just compare that now to Vegas 17. Just want to see if it got any better. Eleven seconds, 11.5 seconds. So it has gotten a little bit better. It sounds pretty good. Well, I guess I could do another comparison here while I'm at it. I happen to have DaVinci Resolve, the very latest and greatest version. And I'll fire that up and see how long that takes. About 26 seconds. I might have jumped the gun on that a little bit, so it might actually be closer to 27. But let's get on to the piano project I shot. Open up Vegas 18. And I see I'm right on the directory I want to be on, the old-time piano contest. And I'll go into my media. First I'm going to do the Z-Cam footage, and I'm going to use the concatenated one because I'm going to have to line up the audio. And now we'll get the audio. Now, Vegas offers you an option when you're dropping multiple files like this into stacking them up on one track or stacking them up on multiple tracks. And I'm going to hold down the Shift key, and I'm going to add across tracks. This way I've got all my pieces where I want them to be, and I'll give this a name. I'm going to give it I see I got the clip's name, but I'm going to name the tracks the same way. Keeps me from getting confused. And I think what I want to do is group these so that I can move them around together and they won't get out of sync with each other. So I create a new group. This way, I could do that. And I can see I can roughly get these into sync like this. And I'll zoom in a little more. Get it better. This is very prominent. Usually when you're working with piano recordings, the very first note they hit, they whack. So that's a good one to line up on. I think that looks pretty good. Get some bigger, make the peaks bigger and more prominent. Yeah, I can come over just a smidgen here. Yeah, it looks pretty solid. And you could pretty much tell if you're in sync by playing these two things together. And if you don't hear a whole lot of echo, you know you're good. Sounds pretty good. Now the camera audio is not going to sound as good as this audio. This was recorded with a DPA stereo XY microphone set. The camera audio was recorded from a distance across the room, so it's not going to sound anywhere near as good. So I'm going to end up muting this because I really don't want that in my final project. But I will call it camera audio. And I'll maybe label this camera. Okay. So we're pretty much in sync here. And I'm going to save this so that I have a project name in there. And what shall I call it? I'll call it UMPA for Old Time Music Preservation Association. They're actually the people that conduct the contest. And I'm putting a 2-digit number here so they can keep this in order. I'm going to actually use this to create a stereo piano track. And then in the next step after that, I'm going to use the stereo piano track together with the vocal to create a mix. So I'm going to save this as piano. And what I'm going to do here, take this off a solo. I basically want the piano left hand panned hard left, and the piano right hand panned hard right. And I'm going to mute this vocal track for now because when I export this, I just want to get these two tracks and I want to get them into a stereo mix file of just piano. Well, let me also make this full screen so that you can see it a little better. And I'm also going to knock out all the effects on the piano because I'm going to actually do these in the next step when I'm doing the audio mix down together with the vocals, because you really got to hear them all together to get it right. Now, another thing for all you audio engineers out there, as you probably all know, that when you do something like this, take a mono file and pan it hard left and hard right, the panning laws change the volume. And to compensate for that, I'm going to bring these tracks down to -6. Okay, I've muted the vocal track and the camera audio track. I've reduced the volume on the two piano tracks to convert them to stereo. And I've knocked out all the FX on the two piano tracks. So I'm ready to render this. I like to render my audio files to a Sony Wave 64 format. The reason I use that format is because I do a lot of pretty long projects. Typically they go an hour to 3 or 4, and that's too long for regular WAV file. So if you use a Sony 64, the advantage of that is that you're pretty much unlimited in the length of your audio file. So I'm going to render this now, and I'm going to do it to the project location, and I'm going to just keep the name the same so that I know where that it came from. It defaults to the name of the project, so I'm going to render it. Took 6 seconds. It's only a 20-minute file, and it's only got 2 tracks, and there's not really much processing going on to turn those 2 mono tracks into a stereo track. So it doesn't take very long to render that sort of thing. So now I'm ready to move on to the next step. The next step is going to be creating an audio mix. First thing I'm going to do is save this again, just to make sure that I've got it in exactly the same condition as when I rendered it. And then I'm going to save it now under a new name. I'm going to save it as, I'm going to increment this to 01 so that it always comes up second in the list. And I'm going to call this one Audio Mix. Now that that's saved, I can safely knock out these 2 mono piano tracks. And if I do a little refresh here, I should see the audio track. Yeah, there it is. And I'm just going to make sure that I'm putting it all the way at the beginning, because now it should be in perfect alignment. And it looks to me like it is. But we can play it real quick and make sure. So first I'm going to listen to the camera track by unmuting that. And now I'll try the same thing for the mix down track, the piano mix. Sounds much better. This is recorded with a DPA microphone, whereas the camera audio tracks were recorded with a Audio-Technica shotgun mic from across the room. So the close-up recording of the DPA is going to always sound better. Now, one of the things I like to do when I first start doing a project like this is I like to mark off the regions which represent the songs. And this particular project has 3 songs in it, and you can pretty much see them visually. And it's pretty easy to set this up. You just drag up here, and now you've got an area selected. I right-click, and I insert a region, and I can call it anything I want. And I can do the same for the other 2. Now, it just so happens that I'm going to hit Control-Z and undo that, because I have a better, quicker way to do it since I've done this project before, and I don't want you to have to suffer through me doing it and hunting down all the start and stop points. It's got a little screen here called the Edit Details, and one thing I can do is I can paste. I've copied this from the completed project, and now what it's done is it's slapped in all the regions. This is a pretty handy feature, particularly if you're recreating projects and that sort of thing, to recreate your regions and copy them from one project to another. For instance, I didn't put any regions in the piano track thing, but I could very easily go back there and stick them in this way. Another thing I like to do when I'm editing audio for video projects, particularly if there's a vocal together with a instrumental track, is I like to envelope everything. Essentially what I mean is that I'm going to put a audio envelope, a volume envelope, on each audio track. And I can hit the V, and it has inserted a volume envelope on this vocal track. I'm going to also throw one on the piano track. I'm not going to be doing that first, but I'm going to need it later. So now I'm going to show you what I do with this volume envelope. And I'm going to start editing the vocal track. First I'm going to unmute it, and maybe mute the piano track, and bring this up full screen. by maximizing the track height. So what I want to do here is I want to knock out the piano sound off of this vocal track. At least I want to knock out the piano sound that's occurring when there's no singing going on. And the reason for that, I'll show it to you, is I'm going to play this, and what I'll do is I'll solo just the vocal track. Notice how you can hear the piano going on in the background. The piano's sound is coming from back here, and this is the rear of the microphone, so it does reject sound to a great extent coming from behind. But it doesn't knock it out completely. Now when the vocalist is singing, that's going to be much louder because it's coming from the front. So what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and isolate all the times that she's singing and knock out the time she's not singing. Now I can see that some singing starts right here because it's quite a bit louder than what's going on over here. And I might give it a quick listen to see where it begins and ends. Why can't I forget like I should? So I know that from what I just listened to, that her voice is going on there. Now this is something I really like about Vegas. And I think they got this idea from Cakewalk Sonar, because Cakewalk Sonar did it this way, and boy, it's really great. And Vegas has now doing it this way, and it's equally great. I've marked off this region, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click on this envelope within the region. And what it's done is it's stuck in breakpoints. And if I zoom this out, or zoom it in, you can see that it's put 2 breakpoints on each end of the region. And now what I can do is I can grab this part, and boom, it's gone. And I can do the same thing. See, here's another phrase. Now you got to make sure you get this right, otherwise you'll be chopping her voice to pieces. And I think the piano hit right there. So I will mark this and knock this down. And now I can also go back to the piano track if I wanted to and do just the opposite. But I'm really not going to be knocking out her singing phrases on the piano track because the piano's playing while she's singing. And if I did that, you would really hear it. You don't hear it. Let's see, I'm going to unmute that and make sure the piano track is unmuted. And why can't I forget like I should? Heaven knows I. So you can see that this actually works pretty well. Now I'm not going to make you suffer through all of this because since I've done this project before, I can copy the entire envelope off of the other project and paste it onto this project, which is what I'm going to do. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to switch from the normal edit tool to the envelope edit tool. I make sure that I've got my vocal track selected here by clicking on it. And then I'm going to do a region mark, just like I did when I was making a region. And you notice that the little points that were already there are lit up now. Now, I did exactly the same thing on the other file, and you can do edit, and what I did over there I did was edit copy, but what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do edit paste. And you can see what it's done is it's replaced the few points that I had in there with all the points from the other file. And I could do the exact same thing with the piano track, which I think I'm going to do. So the first thing I do is I make sure that I've got my volume envelope selected by clicking on it once. I make sure this is clicked on here. Oh, I've just made it full track width, and I'm going to just do edit and paste again. And I just went into the other file and copied that track. So let's see if this works. And it does. And you can see, I'll show you what I did on the piano part. Notice that I've got a little up and down stuff going on here, and you might be able to see what it is I'm up to if I show you both the piano track and the vocal track together. So you can see that I've isolated completely on the vocal track the vocal phrases. And while those phrases are going on, what I did was I brought down the piano a little bit. Actually, what I did was the opposite. I brought the piano up a little bit in the phrases where there was no vocal sound. I knocked out the piano sound over here, and I raised it up a little bit over here. This is a technique known as ducking, and I'm just doing it manually. Most people use a hardware device to do that. I don't like to do that because I like to be in total control. And when you use a hardware device like that, it's got fake intelligence. I don't call it artificial intelligence. It's very mechanical. And it sometimes does things that are, not cool. So I do it manually. I do it this way, and it works really, really well. So to move things along here, I'm going to just paste in the rest of the audio envelopes that I use. It's just more of the same, just operating on different functions. And I'll give you a summary of what they consist of. Okay, I did it while you weren't looking, but I'll run down what I've got in here now. One thing that you see in here is you see a compressor input gain track envelope, and you can see that I manipulate it. I'm doing this mainly to give special treatment to the speaking parts that precede and go in between the songs. There's a bit of narration and discussion going on in there. Her voice is totally different when she's not singing, so it needs completely different treatment. Another thing I did was I adjusted the levels for the tracks to get a nice sounding mix. So you can see I brought the entire vocal down by 1.5 decibels and the piano track down by 3.5 decibels. Sounds like a good mix combination to me. Do that by ear. I also threw in effects. You can see I've got a track compressor going on, and I've got that parameter set for that. I have track EQ going on. This is the vocal track, and what I've done is I've knocked off the a low shelf on 150 hertz. She's got a moderately high voice, although it's got a lot of low-end quality to it. And the track noise gate, I've kind of disabled that because I don't really use that. That's what the vocal effects look like. On the stereo piano, the effects are a little different. I've got the low frequency shelf, and then I've got a little bump here. I think I do that at 320, 230. I don't think I do anything here. Yeah, that's totally flat. But I give it a little lift on the high end at 6K, 101.5 decibels. I don't do a whole lot of that. One of the things that Vegas has is the ability to employ automation on its effects. So if you come over here, what I've done is I've automated the band 1 frequency. So right now I'm at the beginning of the project. So when you look here and you look at this, you're saying, geez, he's not knocking off much on the low end. It's at 20 hertz. You set this to infinity if you want to do a cut on a low shelf. So it's not really much of a low shelf. But if you come up here to where she's singing, it looks a little bit different. At this point, I'm up to 116. And if we take a closer look at this, you can see what it is I'm doing here. Now, there's an envelope down here. It's very difficult to see because of where they put it. They put it all the way down at the bottom. And when it's down around 20 hertz, it's going to be pretty invisible. Coming in here, let me just see what it looks like while she's talking. Yeah, it's at 150 while she's talking. But at certain times, I find it necessary to fly in a filter. And let me see if I can spot any for you here. I know that I do it usually when I hear something unusual on the high end of the singing. In fact, here it is right here. And I'll just play this for you so that you have an idea of what this is sounding like. What she's doing there is she's hitting some really high notes. And when a singer does that, what I do is I fly in a filter to make it clearer. And this filter is knocking off the low end below 310 hertz. So what it'll do is it'll make her voice sound a little bit cleaner. You know, there'll be no wind in it or any of that stuff. Now, before I show you the next part, which is adding hardware reverb to this project, I think I have to show you a little bit about my audio system. That's a Bricasti M7 reverb unit, very common in the motion picture industry. The only difference being that they have them by the rack full and I have just one, but I make the most of it. I'm not using the unit sitting on top of it today. I'm using the RME Fireface UCX for my audio interface. Audio input 1 on the far left is connected to the XLR output of the microphone I'm speaking to you with right now, while audio inputs 3 and 4, which are to the right, are connected to the outputs of the reverb unit. The inputs to the reverb unit are coming off the back of the unit, and they're interface 5 and 6. Here's a little diagram, which is as much for my benefit as it is for yours, so I don't have to reinvent the wheel every time I need to do this. Okay, we're now ready to get down to the business of recording reverb. The first thing I want to do is I want to bring up the mixing console. I happen to have a tab here set up for it, but if you don't, you can just click right up here, and there's the mixing console. If you don't have it set up on a tab, it'll be floating and you can put it wherever you want. The next thing I need to do is insert a mixing bus. And before I do that, I'm going to hit B for buses to make the buses appear down here. Right now there's a master bus, and that's what this reflects, the volumes that you see going on here while you're playing something. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to insert a bus, because I need to have a bus to send the audio to the reverb. So I insert, and what it's done here is it's inserted bus A, and you can see that it's created bus A over here. And I'm going to pull this down a little bit so that we can see more of it. The next thing I want to do is tell bus A where to send its output. Normally it sends it to master, but I don't want that. I want it to send it to the reverb unit. Now you have to think back to that diagram that I put up there. The reverb unit is getting its input from the outputs of interface 5 and 6 on the UCX. So that's what I want right here. I want this bus to send its output to 5 and 6 on the UCX. So I choose analog 5, and it's done it. Another important thing to attend to is setting the send level on the channel strip that you're sending your signal from. In this case, I'm sending the signal from the vocal track. The control is this little send volume control, and I'm going to set it to exactly -3, because that's what I like to do when I'm sending signals to my reverb unit to ensure that I don't overload it. The other important thing to focus on is this little button here. This determines where in the channel strip the send comes from. And in this case, Vegas is defaulting to a pre-volume control send level. But that's not what I want. I want the send to reflect all this stuff, which is my volume envelope. And so I'm going to change this to post. Additionally, I'm not going to actually use this right now, but if you click on this, you can select what bus this control controls. If I add another bus here, notice that bus B appeared down here. I could now choose which bus I want. Now I'm going to keep my audio from my vocal on bus A, and later I'm going to come over here and do bus B. I'm not going to do that right now, so I'm going to get rid of this bus for now. And everything goes back to the way it was. The next thing I want to do is I want to create a track to record the reverb. So I'm going to come over here, right click, insert audio track. And I'm going to call this vocal reverb. So now I need to tell it where to get its input. And normally it's going to use analog 1 for its input. But I'm going to switch that and tell it to use a stereo bus, analog 3. Because as we know, the input into the UCX, which feeds the output of the Bricasti, is on interface 3 and 4. Now when I click this, it's going to ask me where to put the recordings. And normally it wants to put it in the documents directory, but I don't ever do that. I put it somewhere near where my project is. Here's the old time piano contest. And I see I have a media directory here. I want it to put it in the reverb directory. Okay. So that's where it's going to put it. And I can click OK. Now it's just a question of recording my reverb. Make sure my unit is on. And I can see where the vocals are. They're in here. So I'm going to start recording reverb where one of the vocal phrases first starts. And I don't want it to be that. I want it to be before the phrase. And it's going to record it here. So here we go. I push the record button.
I can't forget like I should.
And it lets me rename it, but I won't bother. I'll just say done. And if you want to hear that and know that it's a reverb and not something else, I can play it. It's reverb all right. Now, I'm going to just pull in everything from the project that I've previously done, now that I've shown you how to do it. And I'm going to do basically the same thing for the piano tracks. I'm going to add yet another bus, bus B. I probably don't need to have two different buses, but I like to do it that way so that when you want to treat them differently, like have one bus, maybe recorded at a different level than the other bus. But I'm going to just zoom ahead and show you the resulting tracks. So this is the final mix now with the reverb in it and all the audio tracks mixed in just the way I like it. You can notice that I've done a number of things here. I've muted these buses because now that I've done my recording, I don't need them anymore. I certainly don't want them to participate in anything. I've also lowered the volume on these reverb tracks that I recorded. You can see that I run the vocal reverb a little bit higher level than the piano reverb. The piano really doesn't need the reverb the way the vocal does, but you have to add a little bit in, otherwise they sound like they're disconnected in space. So now that I'm almost at the end of my audio phase of this project, I'm going to clean up thing here and put things back in order. I'm going to bring the video preview window back into view. I'm going to hide the bus view by hitting B again. And now the bus view is gone. And yeah, I may as well come back to my Explorer window. And I'm going to do my final render. And this is going to also be a Sony Wave 64 file. I'm going to make sure it's going to my project location. And I'm going to render. Well, this took a lot longer. I see it took 8 seconds. I guess all those little reverb tracks add a little bit of a load. It's got the vocal track to mix in, and it's got a stereo piano track. So now we're pretty much done here. The next step is the video editing stage. Vegas is a video editor. It's best known for that. So I really should show you that. But that will be in part 2. Thank you for watching.